Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today, the 29th of December 2025 is a very special anniversary with me. It marks 30 years since I first discovered my favorite writer, Aleksandr Isayevich Solzhenitsyn. May his memory be for an eternal blessing. Wow, I just can't believe 30 years have come and gone already, and this is part of the ongoing series I started on him. It's an intermittent series thus far. I believe it was in the spring, maybe sometime in the summer, whatever. I just started it sometime earlier this year. Just about everything about him, why I love him so much, his biography, different books I do not recommend, all sorts of things like that. And so anyway, let's just start getting down with it. This is based off of the blog post which I just published today called, what Aleksandr Isayevich means to me 30 years later. Just wow. And I know the date because not only do I have an elephantine memory, I also keep journals. And so particularly back then, I recorded just about everything that was happening in my life, so many different things. So yeah, of course I was going to write down oh, I got out this neat library book and I'm interested in exploring more classic world literature. Oh, I'm 16 already. It's my sophomore year. I'm getting so old and mature. I should read more widely adult literature. And so yeah, I recorded that in the journal. It just wow, from that, a tiny spark, a great flame grew. So anyway, it's hard to believe 30 years have come and gone since the night I began reading the then incomplete translation of The First Circle, the first book by Aleksandr Isayevich Solzhenitsyn I ever read. How are the 90s already 30 years in the past? And where did my youth go? It's really, it creeps up on you. All these landmark 30-year anniversaries have been, coming this year for things that happened in 1995. For example, the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the O.J. Simpson verdict. Wasn't that just yesterday? Why are the 90s that far back? So anyway, my intention was to find One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, the typical gateway book most people start with. But alas, the Guilderland Library didn't have it on the shelves. So I got it a much longer book, Plan B, that looked interesting, and damn was I hooked from that very first line with the hands of the fretwork clock standing at 5. It was the same kind of eerie, supra-rational experience I had the first time I read Damien by Hermann Hesse, and I have several videos about that book, feeling mystically transported to another world in ways I can't find words to explain. Over the 2 or so months it took me to finish the book, I felt like I were deep inside that world, contained within the pages, living and breathing everything the characters did. And I guess some of this might be down to just the whole experience of, being a teenager and adolescent. You just feel everything so deeply and intensely in a way you don't really do as an adult, even if you still are whatever, sensitive, imaginative, things like that. I love climbing into this book and living in this world, but it's just a whole other ballpark as a teenager because of the intensity of emotion that comes with that stage of life, for reasons too long to get into here. My parents forcibly returned the book to the library because they thought I was spending too much time with it and not paying enough attention to my studies. In a year I failed chemistry, struggled in European history AP, even failing one semester, and only passed course 2, what New York State calls geometry, by the skin of my teeth. Where is your mind? Is it floating down the gulag with Solzhenitsyn, as I mispronounced the name? So I did what any determined, sensible person does and checked out the school library copy. Seriously, you can't completely ban a book from a kid who's determined, or at least a teenager. I do agree with regulating books that are in school libraries for under a certain age, but I will get much more to that in a future video. Sorry, not sorry, if that makes you think I'm a reactionary right-wing conservative, but anyway, but no, I'm extremely left-wing. But so anyway, I often read in the school library during lunch and read as much as I could in my classes. I was that hooked, and sometimes I would, surreptitiously sneak my lunch in the class while I was reading the book. It's that was the only thing I really, cared about. But that whole sophomore year was a whole cluster. I should do a whole story time video on that sometime if I ever have enough active subs. I proceeded to gulp down Cancer Ward, stories and prose poems, which is a collection of as it says, short stories and what he called prose poems and such like that of varying length, and volume 1 of the Gulag Archipelago in the same fashion during that second half of my sophomore year, as always keeping the books hidden from my parents and reading at school or when they were out of the house. I have particularly happy memories when the weather got like nice again, so I could eat outside Albany High, or at least at that time. I don't know, maybe they've changed. Like 30 years on, they let students eat their lunch outside, and there was this little playground. It was on the school grounds across the street from a soccer field, a little fence around it, like a picnic table, some swings, and a slide. And I would, go out there to eat my lunch instead of in the cafeteria, because I had no one to eat with, wasn't interested in bugging people to eat with them. And I cared more about doing my writing and reading Aleksandr Isayevich's books. So I went to that little library, and I would sit at the top of the slide sometimes to read or write, and at the picnic table. Just wonderful, wonderful memories of at that little, playground in a kind of like a side. I didn't even know what that playground was doing on the high school grounds. I believe eventually they, took it away. And that sometimes I would even eat there when it was like really snowing out, because I just didn't like the cafeteria. But so anyway, I also began reading The Oak and the Calf from the Pine Hills branch of the Albany Public Library over the summer. And I'm misremembering it. I would have to look back in my journal of the time to be for sure, but I might have gotten stories and prose poems out of the Pine Hills Library as well, because it was within walking distance of the Albany High School. So maybe I did get that from there. And particularly, oh wow, I can walk to the library and get back in time. I'll just get a later bus home. At least at that time, like Albany public school students took city buses to and from school. So it was the perfect plan. Like nobody suspected anything. I finally read one day in the late spring of 1997, and then my second big stage of gulping down his works came in 1999 through 2000, when I read Invisible Allies, Volume 2 of Archipelago, Prussian Nights, a long, beautiful poem. It has the most beautiful ending line: "Have no fear, for, oh, already another's soul is on my soul." It's just a beautiful, no, not beautiful isn't really the word, because a lot of ugly things happen in the book, but he just tells it so lyrically and so beautifully about when he's in, Prussia towards the end of, World War II, and he has an encounter with one of the German women. Anyway, it's just, you should totally read it. It's a beautifully told story in a long poem form. And so anyway, one of the other books I read was Lenin in Zurich, which the chapter, it's not really a separate book. It was published as such at the time, but all of the chapters in that book, you can also find them in the complete translation of August 1914, which at that time was not available, and August 1914, the original garbage Michael Glenny translation. That it was a terrible translation. He railed against it himself. Like Michael Glenny, like I don't recommend any of his translations unless they're like literally the only ones you can find for Russian literature. There's so many things wrong with his style. I DNF'd November 1916, which I don't remember when exactly I found. Again, I would have to look in my journals, but it must have been like sometime in early 2000, I want to say I found it. And so anyway, I DNF'd that book because it was such a slog, but I came back to it some years later, and it has the most beautiful, beautiful closing line. How could anyone forbid you? Wait, you can rarely decide for another person that he or she should not do this or that. How could anyone forbid you to love when Christ said there is nothing higher than love, and he made no exceptions for love of any kind whatsoever? I frequently use that line in my own books, like not the exact same line, but characters who are like Christian, of course, like Orthodox Christians, usually they express that same sentiment. Oh, Christ said there is nothing higher than love. So like so many things I, get from him. I could do a whole separate video and blog post about like things like phrases or whatever, catchphrases or aspects of my writing I have, gotten directly from him. Oh, I was just so inspired, like talking about like his depictions of Gulag and just lines he used, like ways of expressing himself. So he has just had an immense, massive influence on my life for the last 30 years in both, personal life and my writing life, and as well in my Russophilia. In my junior year of university, 2000 through 2001, I read his plays, The Love Girl and the Innocent, Victory Celebrations, Prisoners, and Candle in the Wind. I'm not 100% sure. I might have read like one Candle in the Wind a little bit earlier, maybe sometime in the second phase of his writing, but I do distinctly remember like reading at least the three main plays, The Love Girl and the Innocent, Victory Celebrations, and Prisoners during that junior year. Like it's so long ago, even my elephantine memory isn't foolproof. Around 2004 or 2005, when I was still recovering from my car accident and starting to buy a lot of books off of Alibris, I believe that was the website I got most of my used classic literature from. And so anyway, I went back to The Oak and the Calf, which is it's not a it's not a novel. It's kind of like a memoir of Samizdat, clandestine publication within the Soviet Union and the whole like secret networks and smuggling things along, and how he finally got kicked out, had to flee for his life because of the Gulag Archipelago, which he like refused to back down off of or like write or censor in a certain way. And his wife and his mother-in-law and their three sons came to Switzerland, and they eventually found refuge in Vermont, where they lived for about 18 years before they finally returned to the Soviet Union. I'm not the Soviet Union. By then it was Russia. The Iron Curtain had fallen. I'm dating myself. So they returned to Russia in 1994. Sprinkled in all of those focused reading periods, I also read a lot of his essays and speeches, like many of which were published as little extras and such in his various like books. Had I not discovered Aleksandr Isayevich and proceeded to become so instantly profoundly influenced by him, there's no telling if I would have gone back to my hiatus work in progress with a hideous title like, wait for it, Amy and the Boys. Like, what the F was I thinking? Although I was only 13 when I started it. Because of him, my Russophilia was reawakened so powerfully, and I began working on that book again in September of 1996. I mentioned that a number of these things in my video I did on my 30th anniversary of starting that book when January 2023. So it's been even like 2 years past that now. By Hashgacha Pratit, Divine Providence, the most perfect new and improved title came to me. You Cannot Kill a Swan, the love story of Lyuba and Ivan. During that second period of working on the book, the subtitle was really even more long-winded. The love story of Lyuba and Ivan, and how the Lebedeva sisters stayed together and alive. But I wisely realized that was way too long and took the focus off of the main storyline and characters. In gratitude for everything he's done for me, one of my dedications for that book is in his memory. I truly couldn't have done it without his influence. I am the writer I am today in huge part because of Aleksandr Isayevich, and this is there are 3 dedications to that book, and the last but not least, the final and the longest one is for him. Finally, in loving memory of my favorite writer, Aleksandr Isayevich Solzhenitsyn, the 11th of December, 1918, through the 3rd of August, 2008. I can't believe he didn't make it to 100. Had I not discovered his writing on the 29th of December, 1995, and instantly taken him into my heart, soul, and mind as my favorite writer and one of my heroes, it's doubtful my Russophilia would have been reawakened so powerfully and thus inspired me to return to this juvenile story in the fall of 1996, imbuing it with all the Russian culture and history which had previously been almost completely absent. May his beautiful memory be for an eternal blessing, and may his soul rest in peace. One of the greatest regrets of my life is never writing him a letter to tell him how very, very, very much he means to me. I had so many chances, and all those years our lifetimes overlapped, but I kept thinking I still had plenty of time, that he'd live to at least 100 just to spite the bastards, as one of his 50th birthday cards said, as quoted in The Oak and the Calf. Because of Aleksandr Isayevich, I also developed my special interest in Russian history, of Gulag and the Great Terror, and I did a number of research projects and essays about that in my various classes over the years in my late teens and at university. For many years, I passionately wanted a PhD in that subject. I've since cooled to the idea of getting a PhD for many reasons, like way too long-winded and complicated to get into here, but that doesn't stop me from being an autodidactic expert. And who knows, perhaps I'll eventually pursue that path, if I have enough money and the academia is no longer as ideologically captured as it is now, and all sorts of other issues. Since I don't believe in elevating my heroes to demigod status, and I don't think I ever did, I've no qualms about critiquing Aleksandr Isayevich's Red Wheel cycle as bloated beyond belief. I have a whole video on that, I'll link to it at the end. And calling out his cringy Swan song, 200 Years Together, also linked to that video, as anti-Semitic garbage, sorry not sorry, with no grounding in actual history. I'm not going to go through all the points of those two subjects all over again here, but suffice it to say they're do not recommend by him. The books I least recommend to a newbie just starting out, save them for last, please. I also very much disagree with how ultra-conservative and reactionary he became in later years. I mean, I'm nothing against him for, being really religious, Orthodox Christian, or even politically conservative, but like the way he did it, it was just, I mean, not saying like he was necessarily like not bad at all for having those views. It's just like they're not my views at all. And just like it was like went way beyond just being like, oh, just a regular run of the mill, like standard, like conservative who just happens to have views much different than mine. It was like, ultra conservative, like reactionary type of politics down to supporting Tsar Vladimir. Seriously. However, a pretentious, bloated magnum opus, political views much different from mine, and even a WTF book don't diminish my utmost love, respect, and admiration for him. So much of who I am today is because of Aleksandr Isayevich, and for that I am eternally grateful. Thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. Let me know in the comments, are you familiar with Aleksandr Isayevich's books, or do you have not really had any opportunity to discover him? I do realize he's kind of no longer a hot writer. Most people, even on booktube, aren't really like, oh yeah, we're queuing up to read his books. He's definitely on my must-read list of this year. He's just no longer a writer most people really think or know or care about, because his time seems to have come and gone, particularly because he was writing about the Soviet Union, and that just doesn't exist anymore. We have a whole generation of people now who they were never alive at that time, even too young to remember. But anyway, have you read any of his books? Did you like them? Would you like to read them? Would you like to explore his books outside of the main ones most people still know about, beyond just below a certain age? One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich and the Gulag Archipelago. Do you like Russian literature in general, like later 20th century books? Do you like really, really long books? Who is your favorite writer? What's your experience of discovering your own favorite writer? Do you remember the date you discovered that person? Was it just a magical connection? Oh wow, I love this writer, I must proceed to gulp down all of his or her books as fast as I can, as many of them. I'm just tuned out to everything else happening in the world besides this writer. And I will be very, very excited to continue my series on him, hopefully more frequently and closer together in this coming year of 2026. So look forward to those videos, and thanks again very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.